All right, so today we have a really exciting chapter. If people had a chance to take a look, so we're starting into section 3, which is the blind emperor, the invisible dark night of the soul. So we thought last week was a little bit intense because last week we talked about, I'll just review briefly last week, but if you remember from last week, we went through the main symptoms of a dark night. So we talked about the suffering associated with the 3 phases of time. So remember that included talking about when we suffer in the future, we have fear. When we are suffering in the past, we're suffering from lamentation. And when we're suffering in the present, we're suffering from confusion related to the present. And that happens when we identify so ardently with our story. And so we talked about that being the first feature. The second feature, so then we talked about these 3 aspects. And then the second feature we talked about Arjuna, and literally on the battlefield, he starts having a panic attack. And we talked about the different features of what that looked like, of what he was dealing with, and that maybe some of us have also experienced that. And then we talked about the 3 other features. The second is a revealing of our dark side. The third feature was a strong impulse to retreat from life. And the fourth was complete helplessness. And so all of us will have a different story or a different situation in life that will bring us into our dark night, but these are common features that we'll see in all 4. And so one of the questions, if anyone wanted to reflect from last week, this was our kind of homework question, was to unpack the dark night experience that we've gone through and look at it in respect to the 4 main symptoms. Did anyone want to share anything that they came across in their own experience from last week? So, and then the one other question I asked was, were there any other major symptoms that you've experienced or identified? If there have been multiple situations in your life, was there anything that came up outside of those 4 particular ones that that Simon's identified through the book? Anybody have anything to share?
So I can, hello. Hi. So I don't want to talk about the actual episode, but I was, in 2013, I was really let down by someone very, very close. And I'm not sure if I've done it correctly, but I felt everything from first of all, thinking about my past and exactly what I had invested into this particular connection, and doubting myself of why I had wasted so much time. Present, I think I then went on to present, and I was really in total confusion and total turmoil in my whole self. And I actually then didn't have these tools of actually relating it to fear of the past, and what does it say? Sorry, fear of the future, confusion of the present, and sorry. Yeah, lamentation of the past, fear of the future, and confusion of the present. But now everything comes together. And you had the slide of, where is that slide of, I actually did retract from life, from any, I went into my cocoon for a whole year. And actually no one was able to help me. I had a few people, but really no one was able to help me. I slowly came out of it, and actually I'm now able to look at that event and actually see the silver lining of, I'm not sure if I see the picture in the same way, but I actually was able to find out so much more about myself, and I evolved into something much stronger, So I am very thankful for the event, although if you were to ask me, I also often reflect on it badly, but I am much stronger and a much freer person. I've found freedom. I was tied down before, but I found freedom. So yeah, I'm not sure if I've actually answered, but I did reflect and it's helped me so much.
Yeah, thank you, Avni, for sharing. We were just speaking about this last week, that these are the situations that really propel us on our journey in life, particularly our spiritual journey. But these aren't experiences we go searching for or we welcome day to day, right? Because they're, again, we talked about the dark night of the soul being much more than just a bad day, right? This is an extended period of time by which, again, these four features come up, and they'll be quite difficult because, again, like we see, they're marked by periods of feeling confused, helpless, and not wanting to really face anybody or anyone, right? So thank you for sharing that. That really puts those four aspects into context. Does anyone else wanted to share any, like, one of those four features, anything in particular that came out of that from last week?
So I have something to share, Ricken. I feel like for myself, ever since, the PMA in 2019, I've gone through some of that because, what I realized, one of the things that I realized after the PMA, and it took me over a year to realize that, we do the ideal life, right? In a year, we write down what that looks like. And I realized sometime late last year that what I had put in my ideal life, probably 60% of it wasn't even my ideal life. It was somebody else's, right? It was what I had thought, maybe, I guess, somehow my subconscious was supposed to be my ideal life. And that, I guess, journey of some of the suffering, the looking through the dark side, the looking at, who I am in a different way, right? Who I really am versus what's been layered on. And so I guess the culmination of it, after the session we had Wednesday, so I had taken a package at work. And so last Wednesday was my first day that I didn't work in the corporate life for over 15 years. And so here I am sitting on the couch, right, later on after the session. And I started writing my book that I've wanted to write for like more than 20 years. And it just started coming out, this dark night experience in chapter 1. And so anyway, I thought I would share that. It was really an amazing Wednesday last week because of that.
Wow. Stacey, thanks for sharing that story and just your courage to be able to move into that next phase in your life. It's not a small thing, especially, I know we've spoken how long you've been in the type of work you're, doing, but that you're a gifted writer and you've wanted that, to bring that into your life in terms of your self-expression. So that's a really big deal.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Wow, that's quite a story. Last Wednesday, huh?
Yeah, it was amazing. Yeah. Yeah. So I was listening.
You were listening.
I was.
Practical application. No, thank you. Anyone else have any thoughts to share from last week? It's a really big question, but I really do feel that if we look at these four kind of symptoms and fit our own personal experiences into these. Again, we talked about the importance of doing that is to really get into, Arjuna's character for the information that's, coming to us from Krishna, because stepping into that space really will impel us to help kind of make a shift and change, which is really, we talked about the Bhagavad Gita and the information in this knowledge. It's not information, it's for transformation, right? So that's really where we're going. And so I'll take the opportunity now just to share my screen for this week's slides. So if
can I just add, sorry, Ricken, can I just add,
please.
yeah, should I say something or shouldn't, but I think I will say that for me, there's a completion there as well. Last week, as you were taking us through this, it made me think about some of the dark nights that I've experienced in my life. And, if I had this information or knowledge when I was going through, you talked about the transformation, right? It's like, I have to share this because, maybe some other people will resonate as well, especially, I knew when you were sharing, you didn't have to tell me your events, but I'm like, I've been there. Where it's a whole year, or sometimes a little bit longer. And if I had this group, or if I had this knowledge, or if I had this information, I probably would have had an insight into what was happening with me. And it would not have taken a year or so. And so much suffering may not have happened. What do you think, Avni? Like if you had access to this or this insight as well.
So I also agree with you, but I love what Robin Sharma says in his PMA, is that we receive the information that we're ready for. So I'm not sure whether I would have understood it then, or whether I was mature enough in 2013. In fact, that was before PMA. And I've had so much, just like Stacey, I've had so much growth in all the 4 events I've attended with him and other events I've attended. And all of this group, I'm not sure whether I would have been mature enough to appreciate you all in the same way, or even this text. So I agree with you, but I think that I really have received the information at the right time. And as Robin Sharma would do, I can really sit down and with the help of these exercises, deconstruct what I went through, and grow from it even more now. I can actually grow faster now. So
that poses a question to Ricken then, Ricken, because this is you are the guru when it comes to spirituality for us. You are our teacher. So then with what Avni is talking about, is there then also the element of our soul's journey? So as part of our soul's journey, we needed to go through what we are going through. So regardless of having access to the wisdom, to the knowledge, to the text, that our soul also needs to be ready to receive it, because our soul needs to go through that process to evolve. So there's, I say there's 2 paradigms we live in. One is there's our soul, and then there's the physical paradigm we live in as well. What do you think, Ricken?
Yeah, I was just, we'll get into this in the next couple of, probably in the next couple of chapters, but there's a chapter dedicated to karma. And there is definitely for us to have, again, Simon's very particular when he says these experiences of the dark night, they're there for us to basically push us on our spiritual journey, right? And if we can, hopefully see it in that way, because we have to understand there are a lot of individuals, and I mentioned this last week, is that I try to see everybody has their own unique story, and a story that all of us will have that will break your heart. But the only thing that differentiates every individual is how they respond to their own personal experience. That's really the only aspect, because we're all, we're in a place, the Bhagavad Gita describes that we're in a place, it's called Dukhalayam Ashasukam. Dukkha means a place of, suffering. And so we've come with an expectation to be happy in a place where it's not entirely possible according to Krishna. And so that, I feel like life is all about readjusting our expectations, right? And moving through, the events that happen to us and then trying to see that they're happening for us, right? And that's really that kind of evolution that we have to go through. It's really hard, as we've all come to understand, for us to really push ourselves forward and grow in a comfortable environment, right? One of the, I think I mentioned this, maybe I didn't, I mentioned this recently to a friend, but there's three enemies of growth. And I will just try to share that slide because I think it's really great. I'm just going to pull it up, but there's three enemies of growth that I just wanted to share. And I'll show you, because they're really, once we think about these three enemies of growth, three enemies of growth where it can be when we're too busy, too comfortable, or too proud. And I really think that this crystallizes a lot of the things that maybe hold us back sometimes in our life, are these three enemies of growth. And if we can, I know we can, I can step back and I can quote all three of these in different phases of my life. And so that's why we need to take time to ourselves, and we're not always claiming to be too busy, and we set intentions and priorities, and we try to live by our values. Always life is going to happen in such a way that we don't always get too comfortable. So we always have to be mindful of that. And when we have this mindset of, this I know mindset all the time, this also, can stop us from growing. And so just remembering these three things, I think, are really helpful when we're going along our journey and seeing potentially if we feel a little bit stuck. I'm sure we could oftentimes reference one of these three factors in maybe what's stopping our growth. So yeah, thank you for sharing that, Ida.
Can I ask you, is too comfortable the same as ignorant, oblivious, or too lazy?
So I can definitely speak for, like, the too comfortable aspect is definitely, when it comes to our own development, I think there's an element of always celebrating our wins to help us, to keep us motivated. But there should always be, and Avni Rasnath, he talks about this in Remembering Who We Are, for us to feel that sense of the need to grow, there always has to be some feeling of dissatisfaction, right? If we don't have that feeling of dissatisfaction, it's very, I feel that it can lead to that state of being too comfortable, right? Where everything is okay and everything, I'm happy with where I'm at. It's often understood that in our spiritual journey in life, we're going up or we're going down. There's no real coasting, right? There's no kind of straight line. It's either one or the other, right? And so that fire is there really to always kind of help us go up, right? The fire of what I call life. And so, yeah, I would say that the too lazy aspect is, can be seen in the too comfortable, space. From my experience, definitely. I know Ifer had something to add. And just before we move on, I just want to welcome Rita, Paul, Livia, Ami, and Ifer, who joined just a few minutes after. Ifer, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I think you might have answered my query. I was just going to say, can the change or the dark night occur outside of yourself, like with Stacey, how she described redundancy, or can it be brought on by yourself, and can the growth be the same? But I think you've explained it in events that are happening to us rather than for us.
Yeah, if we can see events happening for us rather than always to us, right? For us means it's there for our, we're seeing it kind of in a larger picture of this is part of my journey. And when it's happening for us, then we don't get overly attached and stuck to our story, right? And we talked about in the past weeks that when we get too stuck in our story, this is also a block right? Because then, and we're going to see this in today when we're introducing the character of Dhritarashtra. This is what he represents as being too, within, confined by his story. So yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else have any thoughts or comments to share? We were just going to start into our first slides. And we will go ahead. So this is, again, introducing another, today we're going to be introducing another very important character, the Emperor Dhritarashtra. And so I just wanted to just always take the opportunity to review our culture, that we're trying to bring full presence to what we're doing, respect for everyone who's joined, and the determination to do the work. And a couple of weeks ago, I started adding this practice of humility and two very easy practices of what we can do to bring more humility into our life. And two of them were two things that we should always remember: what good others have done for us, which keeps us in the space of the feeling that we need other people. And the second is what bad we have done for others. And that will always help keep us in the space of wanting to improve. And then the two things that we should always try to forget are what bad others have done for us, and then conversely, what good also we have done for others, right? And so that will also, these two practices of the two things we should remember and the two things we should forget. I know we're going through it every week, but again, we can always be reminded of these four things in our journey as well. Because we talked about the importance of this quality of humility is really critical in understanding the deeper information that's presented to us. So I'll just go ahead and just our invocation, I will start. Om Gyan Dimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Karoti Vachalam Pangu Langete Girim Yat Kripata Maham Vande Shri Guru Dinataranam Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripasunda Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So we were offering respects to our teachers and mentors, acknowledging that we have been born into ignorance where we don't know, and the teachers that have come before us are imparting, opening our eyes with the torch of knowledge. The second is offering our respects to our teachers, our spiritual teachers, who are able to, what I always like to say, make the impossible possible. And the third is offering our sincere respects to all those that are seekers of the divine and can help fulfill the desires of everyone by bringing compassion to all living beings. So again, thank you so much for joining us. And I wanted to start this first slide by introducing this character of Dhritarashtra. So this word, if people caught in this chapter, this word Dhritarashtra, it's a combination of two words, Dhitra and Rashtra, but it in fact means one who has usurped another's land, right? That's in fact what his name means. And if we see here, by the way by which he came to the throne wasn't, what was supposed to, like the backstory to how he became the king was that his older brother was the king, and he died. His older brother Pandu, Pandu is Arjuna's father, and he passes away at a young age. And so basically what's supposed to happen is that Dhritarashtra is supposed to be king for just a short period of time until Yudhishthira, Arjuna's eldest brother, who is basically the rightful heir to the throne, is then due to become king. But that's not what happens, right? He remains the king despite the sons of Pandu, specifically Yudhishthira, who we've mentioned in the previous sessions, because he, if people remember, I'll just go back, he has this famous quote, which if everyone remembers, this is a famous line from Yudhishthira. He talks about, he's known as the Dharmraj. Dharma means one who embodies Dharma. He's a dharmic king, and it's because he never tells a lie. And this is one of the famous quotes: "I've not yet made that lesson part of my character. When I do this, then I can said to have retained it." And I think, again, it's always an important line to go back to. But anyways, he's supposed to be king, and Dhritarashtra basically, by unfair means, keeps the kingdom because he wants to give it to his elder son, Duryodhana. And Duryodhana, his name, again, his name means one who is a dirty fighter, right? That's actually what one of the names for Duryodhana it means. And so we understand here from and Simon gets into a little bit more about who he is, but we see what Dhritarashtra represents. He represents a few things, but Dhritarashtra is a king who is blind, and this is the reason why he's not, from just a physical point of view, not fit to be king. But he's not only blind of like the outside world, but he's also blind to his inside world as well, right? And to me, in one sense, what's such a tough punch to my gut in this chapter is the introduction of this concept of an invisible dark night of the soul. So most of us have had an external situation that's happened in our life that's brought us into that period of a dark night. But now Simon's really getting into what an invisible dark night looks like. And he literally says an invisible dark night of the soul that can persist the duration of our life without our even being aware of it. And this is what, in fact, Dhritarashtra represents. He represents this invisible dark night because this invisible dark night is not so much what's going on in the outside. It's being ignorant or blind to our inside, our inner qualities, and those things that we tend to push away or ignore in our life, right? So Dhritarashtra represents this blindness, but this blindness in fact leads to ignorance, right? And Simon specifically notes this, that this inner blindness or not looking leads to that space of ignorance. And Dhritarashtra, he basically represents, Simon notes, he represents the deliberate failure to see and the deliberate avoidance of truth. So those are two very specific ways that we can, when we view Dhritarashtra. And for those that have read the copy of the Gita, one second, I just wanted to get another, once, if I can find it. Well, I think it's with me here. Right. It's right here. So for anyone who is needing a supplement to this book that we're reading here, we're going to talk about it later, but this is the copy that I recommend to supplement. If people are wanting just the specific verses, I will post it in the group, but it's Talks Between the Soul and God, and it's by Rancher Prime. It will definitely complement this book very well. But if we see the first words of the Gita, the first word spoken by anybody in this book is in fact from Dhritarashtra, right? And he basically asks, like the person on the left, that's his, it's basically his advisor and servant, Sanjay. And now for those of you who may not know, Sanjay, the Vyas, who is a great sage of that time, and he's in fact the compiler of all the Vedas, he wants to give Dhritarashtra the ability to see the battlefield, right? And Dhritarashtra refuses because he's been blind his whole life. He says, no, I don't want to see. He says, you give the divine vision, the Divya Chakshu, to Sanjay, my servant, and he will tell me what happens on the battlefield. So that is a picture of Sanjay, his advisor, who basically is recounting the events. But the first thing that Dhritarashtra asks him, he says, oh, Sanjay, what happened once my sons and the sons of Pandu had assembled at the holy field of Kurukshetra ready to fight, right? And so we understand the sages have commented that we understand that these first words that Dhritarashtra makes, they're in fact marked by fear, lamentation, and confusion, right? And so we understand that Dhritarashtra, he's also like his elder brother Pandu. They were all given a tremendous training, wisdom, knowledge, right? And even from his counselor, his advisor Sanjay, again, he's given tremendous like wisdom and knowledge. But Dhritarashtra's downfall, which oftentimes can be seen in us, what happens with Dhritarashtra, his life is a deficiency in his incapacity to act on what he knows, right? And so oftentimes, and we'll discuss this later, is that we often know the right thing to do, but sometimes yet we're not able to do it, right? So this incapacity to follow the wisdom we are given, this in fact is what Dhritarashtra's character represents, right? And so I just will take just a minute just to reread from like the actual book, which will give us a little bit more sense of who he is. But it says here, Dhritarashtra was blind from birth, both literally and figuratively. His blindness represents folly or ignorance and unwillingness to see, the opposite of wisdom. Largely responsible for the great civil war at Kurukshetra, Dhritarashtra is caught up in his story and paralyzed by attachment to his ambitious son Duryodhana. While Dhritarashtra represents attachment to the story we create in our mind, his son Duryodhana embodies greed, the offspring of attachment. So we're on page 58. Dhritarashtra is the most powerful Kuru alive, and yet there is something lifeless and impotent about him. When we take our human story so seriously, we become a prisoner to it, confined within its narrative walls and governed by it. We trade away our inner freedom. We may end up passing our entire lifetime never truly having started living. And this amazing quote by Oscar Wilde observed, following his own dark night of soul, to live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist, that is all. The name Dhritarashtra signifies both powerful ruler and one who has seized the land of another. Having usurped the Kuru throne and taken the lands of his nephews, the Pandava, Dhritarashtra is blind emperor in a false empire. And then it says, the blind emperor seeks his power by what he can control around him instead of within him. Paradoxically, the more we need to control what is happening around us, the less in control we feel. So I just wanted to take a moment to just, any reflections or any thoughts based on anything that was shared of introducing Dhritarashtra. Anyone have any specific questions about him or anything that we just read? Feel free to make any comments too. No? Okay. So I will take that as our cue to keep going.
No, I don't mind making a comment.
Oh, please.
I'm waiting for others. I just wanted to say that I can relate to him so much, as in before I started this journey of this increasing this spiritual journey and climbing up the spiritual ladder, I can relate to this so much in terms of wanting to control the external world and everyone around me rather than really taking the time to look within. And I really was not in control, but the more and more I look within and try to work on myself, it changes my aura, and actually the external world falls into place. If it's just magical. I don't even have to speak or say anything or be in control, but the more control I have over myself and the more I work on myself and correct myself, everything else around me just starts working in the magical way, in the way that I would love for it to be. So
yeah, thank you. I mean, I was just thinking that when we talk about intentionality, if we can always just place that intentionality and that towards ourselves rather than intentionality towards what we want or expect of others, then it can really, I think it was just speaking, you know, it just came to me as kind of something speaking to your point that, you know, so much of how we sometimes live is just wanting to control situations or others. And if we can just focus on that, you know, that intention towards just ourselves and many things around us that we can't control, then, you know, we can live a lot happier.
I just wanted to add one more thing. So most of you know that I'm a life coach, and I coach from the discipline of neuro-linguistic programming, and also what Robin teaches us, and so much more. But this book and these teachings are just even helping me even more with my clients, because the more I live and practice it, the more I'm able to also share that with my clients. So thank you so much, Rikin. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Emily. Anyone else had any comments or thoughts to share? Please, Ida.
Only that, you know, in this chapter, of course, there are many gems, but what really was profound, and I've heard this before, but I suppose in the context of, you know, the first book and this book now, this part on page 59, when we take our human story so seriously, become a prisoner to it, confined within its narrative walls and governed by it. It's just so profound and a reminder that we are, you know, and when I read that, I had to go back and reread it again and again, because each time I read it, I reflected on my own narratives, my own stories, my own movies, and how attached I became within my story to my emotions, to my outside world, to all of that, which caused, you know, those four sufferings, I guess. And I think, you know, if we can remember and constantly remind ourselves, and reflect as well. And this is something that I'm doing in this Wednesday sessions or Thursday sessions now, keep bringing me back to the reminder. Mm-hmm. You know, it just brings me back to the start, brings me back to the start, brings me back to the start, that we're just a story. We're characters in a story, and that we shouldn't take it so seriously, because there's two definite things in our life, and that is our birth and our death, which inevitably is going to happen for all of us. And we have our soul journey. We're having all these experiences. But I think when we really, really understand and get to the point where you have gotten to, because you are a guru here, is that we are going to get, and he shakes his head, that we are going to experience freedom, or at least have the space to, what's the word? What am I looking for? To really connect to ourselves and be free in this life when we don't take our stories so seriously. Mm-hmm. Anyway, I just wanted to share that, express that. I don't know how else, what you guys think, but yeah, very profound. It's a good reminder. You should read this to us every
week. The reminder, in fact, is not even, it's not even weekly. It needs to be daily, right? And that's where I feel the practice of having some sort of daily sadhana or spiritual practice is really helpful, because it brings us into that space of, you know, constant reminder, because otherwise we are identifying with our body, our ego, and, you know, that we talked about that concept earlier in the sessions, ahankara, the me, myself, and I. So thank you for sharing that, Ida. Oh, so Livia mentioned that she couldn't speak at the moment, but she has a question. Can a trauma-informed society be a step towards going beyond our stories / attachments? How can we learn how to release trauma or stop taking our stories too seriously? Yeah, so that's a really good question. Does anyone else first want to comment on that? Can a trauma-informed society be a step towards going beyond our stories?
You know, I have an analogy. I don't know if it completely answers the question, but I saw it in a TED talk. It wasn't even completely about all this, but it was talking about the need to control, right? And it talked about how, like, if you have that need to control, it all fits like in one hand, like in the fist, right? Because you squeeze tighter and tighter and tighter, like if there's trauma, right? But it's like your whole purview is limited to what you can see or what fits in that fist, right? And then, but if you open, right, it's like the open arms analogy, right? Like the endless possibilities, like Avni said, right? Those endless possibilities can come out because you're no longer squeezing.
Yeah, Stacey, if you remember when we spoke about the book of Dharma very initially, there was this analogy called a mudra. A mudra is a hand formation that represents, and we talked about in life, we tend to clench onto things and hold on to things as much as we can, right? But the mudra, like life, what life is all about is going from this, the squeezing tight, to this, opening the hand where we receive, right? And so this is really the life is going from the squeezing of holding on to what we can, which is limited, to when the hand is open, we can finally potentially receive all the gifts that are due to us, but we can only do that with this. So this is the mudra where we want to go instead of, staying in this space. So Simon, he was the one who introduced that mudra to me when he first was speaking about. But I remember when he did that, when he took the story from here to here, it was so powerful, right? Just going a flip of the hand. And,
right.
Yeah, no, it really, I thank you for reminding me of that. So,
or maybe you can start that, at the beginning of each week. It's like, hey, our connection could be, hey guys, how you doing? Great. How you doing? Great.
Yeah. So, Livia, did you want to is there anything else that you wanted to, or did anyone else want to comment on Livia's question? How can we learn to release trauma or stop taking our stories too seriously?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we look for the same stories to support our story. We look and keep the focus very narrow. So I agree. I think I can really relate to that, being open to having new experiences, new stories, and really kind of being much more just being opening up that narrow-mindedness and going outside the box. And yeah, definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Ifer. So Livia, we're gonna get to your question a little bit more. We'll make it, it's actually one of our discussion questions, is really we'll touch upon your question. So we'll hold on to it for a little bit and we'll move forward, but it's a really good question. So I just wanted to introduce a concept that Simon brings up in this chapter, and it's this concept of avidya. And so avidya is a term, and I just kind of took a slide to kind of describe it. Sorry, I just got to move my chat box. So he describes basically this term avidya as ignorance. And if we see the way he specifically describes it, he says the sages of India called such folly avidya, often translated as ignorance. In using this word, they meant something far more profound than simple lack of knowledge. Many of us know a great deal, but in our everyday life, we choose to ignore it. Ignorance is to willfully shut our eyes to what we don't wish to recognize. And so, from this slide, and this is a quote, our inability to see things as they are, this is specifically what Simon commented on, what his teacher described to him as this definition of avidya, right? Being able to see things as they are. Again, we talked about, and we talked about, in fact, usually comes because we're kind of confined by our story. And so I just wanted to introduce this term because we're going to see it come up a few times, but this is what that word means. And really, this is what happens in Dhritarashtra's life, is that, you know, he was born into, and again, like what he was born into a royal family where he was imparted a lot of knowledge. And the difference, I think, with many people in life is a lot of us have some type of knowledge, and the Bhagavad Gita describes it as jnana, or knowledge, but then vijnana is realized or applied knowledge, right? So this is that going from that shift is what here is the downfall of Dhritarashtra, is that he's given a lot of jnana, but he's not able to make it vijnana, or applied or realized knowledge, because of this incapacity to follow to follow through on the information he's been given, which means, you know, not to act on what, you know, he knows or to be given. And this comes, again, it says this, it is essentially an ignorance of who we are, right? So we're identifying with that ahankara, that false ego, and we're becoming less aware of what we described last week to, you know, when Paul asked the question, our true ego, which is the soul. And then the next concept that we just wanted to, you know, that was talked about in this chapter was that we, you know, oftentimes we talked about in this chapter that because of the clouds of confusion that occur, this in fact is, you know, our life on a day-to-day basis can sometimes be mirrored and surrounded by clouds of confusion, because we're always we're in a state of confusion about, like, okay, what now or what next, right? And so it was really an interesting, it talks about then having to transition out of this state that we're in. I'm just trying to find of this state of, you know, it says here that it's the knowledge specifically that's given in the Bhagavad Gita that's going to allow us to kind of help break us out of these clouds of confusion, right? Because we know how the scene is set. Arjuna, he comes, we know he's the greatest warrior of his time. He comes and says, okay, I really don't know. I'm completely confused. And he brings himself to a position where he's humble enough to open himself up to the information that's about to come to him. But I really thought this analogy that Simon uses, and the way he refers to these clouds of confusion, is that you know, if we know the sun is always there, but when the clouds are there, we just simply don't see it, right? And so similarly, the analogy that Simon uses is that the knowledge within us, it's there, but it's covered by these clouds, right? And so this wisdom and this knowledge, when applied, it basically uncovers what is already, in fact, there within us. And so I thought that was a very powerful analogy, how he used this concept of these clouds to describe the removal of, once this thing is removed, we basically are just exposed to, you know, he uses the concept of the sun, but he's referring to us, the knowledge and the wisdom that's already there within us. And so I know before I was just mentioned that book that I just wanted everyone to kind of, Simon's teacher, he specifically said, he's like, for you to work through, he's like, this book, this Dark Night of the Soul book, or sorry, A Dark Night of the Soul can be overcome by studying this book. So if people noted in this chapter, there's a tremendous story, which I'm going to wait till next week to go through, because it's such an amazing story that if people caught in the section 3 of this chapter, but it's this elderly monk, he gets up and he talks about this story of a prince, and we're going to talk about that next week. But in Simon's questioning of his teacher, his teacher specifically shines the strobe light on this particular book, the Bhagavad Gita, saying that this book is basically designed for us to be able to navigate ourselves out of the dark night. And so the question that I wanted for everyone else today, or one of the questions, is, if for just for everyone to just take a few minutes to reflect on, is, you know, Simon, he noted this quote is in this book. He says, when the mind is blind, what use are the eyes? And so I wanted all of us to take an experience, you know, to reflect on an experience of our life when we later realized we were in fact blind, right? So we're trying to step into Dhritarashtra's character a little bit. And the reason why I wanted us to do this was to really essentially try to, you know, see, were there any clues, or were there any patterns, or were there any hints as to how we got there, right? Because, you know, one of the daunting things about the information that's presented in this particular chapter about the invisible dark night, I'm sure everyone has heard of the term, we don't know what we don't know, right? And so it's, I mean, it's really, in one sense, it's a little bit, it can be a little bit, I feel like it's a little bit daunting, or can be overwhelming, because, you know, we can't see, we're in a dark room, and even though we might be trying to see, there's going to be still blind spots in our life that we're still not maybe able to identify. And so one of the ways I thought about trying to kind of reflect on how do we kind of, you know, try to get a window into seeing what we, you know, what we don't know, is to maybe go back to an experience where we, you know, we could catch ourselves later to be, you know, where we were blind. And we realized it after the fact, you know, because we were imparted maybe some guidance, some wisdom, some knowledge, and perhaps then stepping back and seeing, okay, was there a certain sense of pattern of thoughts I had? Was there anything there kind of as like a prelude to before we got to that point? And that there could maybe serve as to potentially other situations we may later walk into, but hopefully, again, then being able to catch ourselves. So that was the whole point of this exercise. So I'll just give everyone a couple of minutes just for, you know, just for some introspection and reflection on this. And for those that might have missed the question, I've just shared my screen again, so we could just take a moment to think about this, because I thought this quote really captured it. When the mind is blind, what use are the eyes? Thanks, Stacy, for joining us. All right. I realize this question, can take a little bit longer of a time. Does anyone have any thoughts or comments they want to reflect? I mean, from this question or anything?
I do, because I laughed. I laughed so much. Because this is what my answer is. When we take our human story so seriously, we become a prisoner to it, confined within its narrative walls and governed by it. We're blind because we're in our narrative, we're in our story. We're imprisoned by it. We're blind. That's why I laughed, because I mentioned that earlier, and I thought it was funny. I'm laughing at myself, I think. It's just funny.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I'll just keep laughing. Ava's laughing too. Ava, are you laughing with me?
Of course. I actually took it more, I guess, at some level, the visual. I mean, the eyes are the visual. It's our visual connection to the world, and that many of our decisions and our attachments, and a lot of what we take in from the external is through our eyes, and so the mind is often treated as a secondary way of taking information, and our eyes can be very deceiving if we just focus on that as our primary way of translating the world around us.
Yeah, thank you, Ifer. That's really
As an extension of that, Rickon, though, because if you talked about our eyes, that's one of our senses. So, Rickon, would you agree, or what are your thoughts on? Does the blindness also come through all our senses?
Yeah, if
because
you remember,
it's attached to the eye.
Yeah, if you remember, we talked about when we were in the book of Dharma. I was actually going to use this, like I was pulling up the deck from before, but if we remember from, and I'll just share the screen to relive kind of that particular slide. But if we remember here, the five senses, and that all five senses can serve as like an entry. Remember it came up in the principle of purity, but these are all entry points by which can impact us, right? So what we see, what we smell, what we listen to, what we taste, what we put in our mouth, the food we eat, and what we can touch, right? So I think, yeah, it's just important to see all the senses as gateways. The two most powerful, I feel, are what we see and what we hear on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, thank you for just reminding us that, for sure. And then the other, I wanted to present, just again, go back to these, just as kind of a way to look at potentially thought patterns or patterns or thoughts that kind of can, maybe take us to that point. And I wanted to connect with these 6 unintelligent design principles that Simon talked about in the book of Dharma. And we won't spend any extensive time, but I thought just reviewing them would be great, just as a reminder for myself, but also to look at each one of these as possible reasons for how, potential a pattern. But the first is losing ourselves in the endless search for worldly worth, right? So when we're always potentially chasing someone else's idea of success, I thought of that as a potential way by which we can, sometimes we move into a space that's not, helpful to us. We've talked about this on a reoccurring basis, but again, taking ourselves far too seriously, or specifically our story, right? The third is blindly pursuing an idea of success that is not our own, also connected to that, to the first one. The fourth was continually waiting for our life to begin, right? So that's why I was really appreciating, I was really, really appreciating Stacey's share today, and her, just having that courage, and it does take a lot of courage to move into a new space, to kind of take up what potentially is our calling. And but that continual waiting can also, be that life design that doesn't serve us. The fifth is living in constant opposition to time. So I was just thinking back for myself, and this constant living in opposition to time is where, to me, it speaks to the point of always being too busy, right? To potentially the priorities and values that are important to us in life. And then the last one was believing we can get away with what no one sees. And so these were, if we can recall, these were 6 unintelligent life design principles that Simon presented in the Book of Dharma. And I thought they specifically fed into the discussion that we were having, the reflection question on an experience where we later realized that we were potentially blind. So I thought of those 6 unintelligent design principles as being potential ways that we could look at our life and, perhaps potentially catch a thought of patterns or thought patterns or, ways that we've lived to potentially catch our blindness. Did that make sense to everyone, how we were connecting the question and, the ways by potentially we can get to that moment of blindness? Because unfortunately, when we're there and we're in it, it's hard for us to, to really see. And we'll definitely next week, I had a couple of, I was hoping good questions also to share, to kind of, Livia, your question specifically will come to, next week. It was just in a reflection question we didn't get to, but thank you for joining us, everyone. Does anyone have any closing comments? I know, Avni, you had your hand up.
No, I'm good. I actually just wanted to say, when the mind is blind, what use are your eyes? And what I reflected on is actually, it's always in hindsight. So it's actually reflecting and learning and using our past experiences as, I would say, case studies. So you are able to look at your past, look at the events where your mind might have been blind. But the question I had is that a self-realized soul, does that mean that their mind is not blind? And yes, it probably does. And the more that, so I believe that the more that we learn, and especially with the spiritual journey, the more our mind becomes consciously, we move from consciously incompetent to unconsciously competent, unconsciously incompetent,
Right.
to consciously incompetent, to consciously competent, and then a self-realized soul is probably unconsciously competent. So I think the more we live through this deconstructing our past events. So I believe that we're in a state of our mind is blind, because I believe that life throws us things that we have to learn. As you said, where we're not able to fathom them. So, but the more we are on the spiritual journey, the more we have the capacity to really to deconstruct it earlier. So I'm getting more aha moments. I don't know whether I can actually see it before it comes or actually see it very quickly when it comes, but I can definitely do it a few hours later, a few days later, because we're immersing ourselves on Wednesday, which I find amazing, and today, which I find amazing. So I'm very grateful. So yeah.
Thank you,
I
Avidya.
don't know.
And just to speak to your point, Simon, at the beginning of this chapter, he describes the definition of what he defines to be a master. He says, a master, I don't mean someone who commands others. I mean someone who has mastered their mind and senses, someone who has mastery over fear, lamentation, and confusion, the three types of suffering related to time, right? That's super powerful, right? Like no fear, no confusion, no lamentation, right? It comes from it has to come from a deep space of self-awareness and faith. Marius, please share to close us out.
I was amazed about this blindness, about this ignorance in my past and my present. And I saw two categories of blindness. Sometime when I was blind, and this is it, I didn't saw what's happening around me. I didn't saw people around me. And second category, when I choose not to see. I didn't want it to see what's around me. I closed my eyes. And in both categories, there was something more than my eyes. There were metaphoric eyes, people around me. And some of the people around me told me, hey, Marius, you cannot see, you're blind. What's happening to you? What's around you? And some people saw that I was blind, but didn't told me. One of them told me a few moments after I realized that I was blind and I made some mistakes and I took stupid decisions. And some of them came after the war and they told me, I didn't want to tell you because maybe you were upset. I saw that something is something is wrong with you, but I didn't want to say something. And this happened in my professional life and in my personal life also. So I think that another pair of eyes are people around us, and there are some people around us that can took us out of this blindness, that can show us our blind spots, and these are our friends, our mentors, our relatives maybe, and I think it's treasure in our life to value these people around us, and when we are blind again, because in this present moment I feel some blindness. I don't know exactly what it is, but I feel that there are some blind spots that I cannot see in my business life, in my personal life, and my intention is now to ask people I trust, what can you see and I cannot see? What stops my growth? What's wrong with my business? What's wrong with my personal life? What do you think I'm not seeing now? And this is something I will take from this session to ask people around me about my blind spots.
Yeah, thank you so much, Marius. We will get into this a little bit more in the coming weeks, but the only reason Arjuna is able to get out is because he has the guidance of an external perspective, right? And then one of the questions we're going to answer is, who constitutes an individual who can give us good guidance, right? It's not everybody, right? It's not everybody. There's specific qualities of an individual that will kind of open up and discuss of who that type of person, what they look like, that can really provide us the guidance we need, right? They have to know us to a certain capacity. Otherwise it'll be general advice, right? So we'll talk more about that. But Marius, thank you so much for sharing that. And if we all had your mindset on a daily basis, you know, the world would be such a different place.
Thank you.
So thank you. And yeah, on that note, I wanted to also welcome Hiba. I know she came a little bit later, and Enver also came a little bit later. We're really thankful that you guys were able to come. And yeah, any closing comments, Hiba or Enver? No? Okay. Well, anyways, we will wrap up today, and we'll see.
From my side, sorry.
Oh, Enver, yes.
I am very sorry being late, but I was on time, but I couldn't enter. So I waited. It's going to be 1 o'clock. So I waited and came late. Sorry being late, but
No
this is
problem.
also a very interesting session. I can only add the mind needs to be triggered with provocative questioning. So this is what I learned from this session. Thank you very much to all.
Yeah.
And
for-
Rikin,
Yes.
I'm sorry. Sorry, go back.
Go ahead, Hiba.
I thought that the meeting started just now. I had confusion with the conversion of time, I guess.
Oh,
I'm sorry. I was waiting. I was confused with the timing, so sorry for that.
no, it's okay. 6 a.m. Eastern time.
Okay, the conversion was wrong. Sorry.
And for those of you who haven't picked up last week, so we have a we've just created an unlisted YouTube channel with the previous sessions. So anyone who wants to go back, last week's session is up where we talked about the 4 characteristics or features. So for anyone wanting to review any of the content, we have everything kind of sequentially all easy to find now. So really grateful for everyone's time, and we will see everybody next week.
Thanks, everyone. Great to see you all.
Thank
Have a
you.
great
Thank
day,
you.
morning, evening. And we'll
Bye.
see you soon.
Ciao.
Bye.